Hello, this is Paranormal Girl, and today I'm going to tell you 17 of the most terrifying hauntings, exorcisms, and unexplained murders. Number 1. The Dead Girlfriend Facebook Ghost. Reddit users were left unnerved when a young man named Nathan revealed that he was receiving Facebook messages from his girlfriend Emily in 2014. So why was he so terrified? Because Emily had died in a car crash 2 years earlier. She began recycling and resending old messages which Nathan dismissed as a bug. But then she began tagging herself in his photos. Then all of a sudden, Emily used her original first word. Number 2. The true story of the Amityville hauntings. On the 13th of November 1974, Robert DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at 112 Ocean Avenue, a large house situated in a suburban neighborhood in Amityville. He was arrested, found guilty, and jailed, and his house was put on the market, which meant that in December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the Amityville home. For the next 28 days, the family were terrorized by unseen forces. Kathy had vivid nightmares about the murders and discovered the order in which they had occurred and the rooms where they took place. The Lutz children also began sleeping on their stomachs, in the same way that the dead bodies in the DeFeos were murdered and that had been found. Things grew steadily worse, with mysterious injuries being inflicted upon the females of the household. Strange footsteps appeared on the ground, and the discovery of a secret room which did not appear on the blueprints of the house. Painted completely red, the room was dubbed the Red Room, and the family's dog was terrified of it. After deciding that something was wrong with their house, George and Kathy Lutz carried out a blessing on the 8th of January 1976. According to reports, George held a silver crucifix while they both recited the Lord's Prayer, and while in the living room, George allegedly heard a chorus of voices asking them, "Will you stop?" They attempted a second blessing later that same month and fled the next day, describing the events that occurred as too frightening to ever tell. Number 3. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michael. Did you know that the hit horror movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose was based on a true story? While there was never an Emily Rose, there was an Anneliese Michael. According to numerous reports, the young girl was afflicted by intense shaking and the loss of control over her body. Confused by her symptoms, doctors diagnosed her with grand mal seizures. But her behavior grew worse. She began attacking the family members and drinking her own urine. Most tellingly of all, she seemed very afraid of religious objects. Her concerned family eventually convinced the priests and they went on to perform multiple exorcisms. Anneliese died in 1976 of pneumonia. Before the last exorcism, there had been 40 by that time could be performed. Number 4. Unexplained Ghost Stories, the Death of Elisa Lam. This unnerving elevator surveillance tape that records a young woman's strange behavior in an elevator has been claimed by many to show proof of ghosts. Why? Because it features the last few moments of Elisa Lam's life. In the footage, Elisa's repeated attempts at pressing the lift buttons proved to be ineffective. It refuses to move, and the doors open and close apparently at random. She can also be seen moving in and out of the lift, hiding from someone outside it, and chatting and gesturing with some seemingly invisible entity. Right after the event of the video, Elisa apparently gained access to the rooftop of the hotel, climbed to hit its water tank, and somehow ended up drowning in it. The rooftop was alarmed. The tank was 8 foot high, and she managed to close the heavy lid after herself, despite the fact that workers had to cut it open with tools to remove her body. Many paranormal investigators have claimed that this, along with the frightening footage, proves that Elisa's death was caused by supernatural forces. Number 5. The Exorcism of Roland Doe. In the late 1940s, priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on a young German boy. Roland Doe, so referred to in a bid to protect his identity, allegedly broke his restraints, pulled a string out of his mattress, and used it to attack one of the priests during an exorcism, which took place in Georgetown University Hospital. According to reports, strange words appeared all over the boy's body. His bed was alleged to have shaken during the encounter, and he spoke in a frightening, guttural voice. After breaking the priest's nose, Roland succumbed to the exorcism and went on to lead a rather ordinary life. Number 6. The Tale of Resurrection Mary. Hitchhiking is a very dangerous mode of transportation, both for the driver and for the hitchhiker. But we suppose you have nothing to lose if you're already dead. On a stretch of road near Resurrection Cemetery in Justice, Illinois, an attractive blonde-haired, blue-eyed young woman, all dressed in white, is often spotted with her thumb in the air trying to wave down a car for a ride. As she's so very beautiful, plenty of men do pull over and let her hop in. Each time she asks to be taken to the cemetery, and each time when they arrive at her final destination, she vanishes into thin air. Number 7. The Skeleton at Hampton Court Palace. According to the HRP website, Skeletor is a ghostly figure that was caught on the palace's CCTV cameras in 2003. They explain on 3 consecutive days, palace security staff were called to close one of the particular fire doors near the palace's introductory exhibition. On the first day, CCTV footage showed the doors flying wide open with a great force, but there was nothing to reveal why. On the second day, the same thing happened, but this time a ghostly-looking figure in a period dress suddenly appeared on the screen and closed the doors. They add, the doors opened again on the third day, but there was no further sign of the ghostly doorkeeper. Number 8. The Black-Eyed Ghost of Cannock Chase. Cannock Chase in Staffordshire is reportedly haunted by the ghosts of 3 children who were murdered by Raymond Leslie Morris in the 1960s. People have reported seeing the children running through the woodland at night. Some have reported that the children sometimes giggle, while others claim that they've heard them begging for help. 2 things always remain the same. However, the children are clothed in white, and they have frightening, staring black eyes. Ghostbuster Tom Buckmaster, who captured the footage, said, "It looks like a child dressed in white, and you can see the legs moving as it walks. I didn't even know I'd captured a ghost until I went over the footage and thought, what the hell was that?" Number 9. The Demon Murder Trial. Arne Cheyenne Johnson. In 1981, Arne Cheyenne Johnson murdered his landlord Alan Bono in Connecticut. But what was Johnson really to blame for his actions? Or had he been possessed? In the first ever case to cite demonic possession as a defense for murder, Johnson's lawyers argued that his actions stemmed from a pattern of erratic behavior which began when Johnson was just a child. Johnson's family had even consulted the demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, saying that the child had been taunted and harassed by spirits and demons for most of his life. Ultimately, the judge ruled that demonic possession was not a valid defense against the first-degree murder. However, despite being found guilty, Johnson only served 5 years of his 10 to 20-year sentence. Number 10. The Real-Life Haunting in Connecticut. Yes, you've all seen the film. But once again, the horror movie was based on real-life events. In the 1980s, the family of Carmen Snedeker reported some very strange incidents in their Connecticut home during the 1980s. It had soon transpired that their home had formerly been used as a funeral parlour, and that the spirits were deeply unhappy that the living had moved in. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in to examine the home, which they professed was infested with demons. Speaking about the horror film that came later, Lorraine said the actual case was much, much scarier than any movie could ever be. Number 11. True Hauntings, Chloe and the Myrtles Plantation. According to legend, Chloe was a slave in the early 19th century, but she was fiercely independent and keen to gain her freedom. As a result, she started listening at doors and windows in a bid to garner the information she needed to break free. But one day, she was found at the door, and the foreman cut off her ear. In revenge, she baked a poisonous cake for plantation owner Judge Clark Woodruff, but his wife and 2 young daughters ate it instead. Chloe was hanged from a tree on the plantation, but her soul is still not at rest. A famous photo taken of the plantation in 1992, and in it Chloe was seen listening at the door. Staff say that she appears frequently between 2 trees outside the home, and she is credited with many mysterious goings-on inside, from misplaced earrings to moving furniture. Number 12. Real-life ghosts, the Disneyland Ghost. It's the happiest place on earth, apparently. So it makes sense that ghosts would want to stick around and beat the queues at Disneyland when they reach the afterlife. Creepy footage shows a spooky figure wandering through the park late at night, looking oddly translucent on the CCTV cameras. And yes, before you ask, several people have died in the popular amusement park, and nearly all in gruesome circumstances. Number 13. The Mothman. The Mothman prophecies was based on the sightings of an enormous moth-like creature said to be seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia between 1966 and 1967. But what did the creature want? Well, many townsfolk were reported that they saw the creature hovering over the town's iconic Silver Bridge. These apparitions continued, becoming more and more frequent until the bridge unexpectedly collapsed during a rush hour traffic. 46 people were killed. The Mothman was never seen again after the incident. But did the creature cause this terrible tragedy? Or was it simply an omen of things to come? Number 14. The gruesome true life story behind the entity. Classic horror film The Entity is absolutely chilling. In 1982 flick, a young woman is raped and tortured by an unseen, unworldly beings. But it's even more terrifying when you know that this was based on a true story. Yep, we're serious. In 1974, a woman named Doris Byther claimed she was assaulted by invisible entities. Despite the fact that many people slammed the young woman as a liar, 2 paranormal investigators, Barry Taff and Kerry Gaynor, decided to investigate. And what they found was very disturbing. From floating balls of light floating about to whispered voices, There's no way we could ever set foot in that house. Doris's son Brian Harris told GhostTheory.com in 2009 that the story was completely true. He said, "What do you want to know? It was all true. Living in that home was hell. We all had experienced some form of attack. There was the pushing, the biting, the scratching being done to us. There were about 4 entities in the home, and they made themselves known by appearing all the time. I think it took a lot of energy for them to do that. When they would make themselves known, it was always like a fog, like a human, but not quite, like a silhouette, just not clear, translucent and foggy. The whole rape thing was real. My room was right next to my mother's, and I could hear the attacks happening. Things being thrown, her screaming, and then she would just come out of the bedroom and have all these bruises on her legs, her inner thighs, just like in the movie. There were times where we would see it happen right in front of us. It was as if a man was standing in front of my mother and would start to beat her. Imagine a woman being beaten. You could see her being picked up and thrown around. Sounds, slaps, but there was no one there to actually do it." Number 15. Unexplained Ghost Stories, the Enfield Poltergeist. In August 1977, single mum Peggy Hodgson called police to a council home in Enfield. When they arrived, she explained that 2 of her 4 children had told her that their furniture was moving all by itself. More terrifying, she'd heard knocking sounds coming from inside the walls. A skeptical police officer looked around the house, and he admitted he saw a chair slide on the floor. The strange events continued to happen with demonic voices, loud noises, thrown toys, overturned chairs, and levitating children reported by many paranormal investigators. American paranormal investigators Ed Warren later said he had observed one of the children, Janet, as she lay sound asleep, levitating in midair. He concluded that the children were subject of demonic possession. Last year, The Conjuring 2 was released based on the events of the real-life Enfield poltergeist. Number 16. The Bell Witch, the real-life Blair Witch. Ever wondered where the Blair Witch Project producers came up with the idea for their film? Well, look this way. In the 1800s, the Bell family moved into a house in a small town in Tennessee. And after just a few weeks, they began experiencing some very spooky activity. It began with knocking and scratching on the walls of their house. But slowly the activity began to grow more violent. The youngest Bell daughter, Betsy, was constantly slapped or pinched out of nowhere. Strange bruises would appear, and other family members felt themselves being kicked or their hair being pulled. Eventually, John Bell fell into a sickness and eventually died to a black bottle that contained some type of poison. Could the Bell Witch really have been the spirit of a slave that Bell had killed, as the paranormal investigators believed? And if so, why did the spirit show so much hatred towards Betsy Bell? We can only guess, and it will remain a mystery. Number 17, still unexplained, the Jamaica Inn. Rumoured to be one of the most haunted places in the UK, the Jamaica Inn has a dark and bloody history. According to legend, a stranger stood at the bar enjoying a tankard of ale one night. He was called outside and quickly went out to see what had happened, leaving the half-finished ale. That was the last time they'd seen him alive. The next morning, his corpse was found on the bleak moor, but the manner of his death and the identity of the assailant still remains a mystery. Nowadays, people have reported hearing footsteps tramping along the passage to the bar. And in the 1900s, a silent stranger was often spotted sitting on the wall outside the inn. No matter how much people tried to engage him in conversation, the stranger refused to make eye contact or speak, and would often vanish without a trace. Could it be that the dead man's spirit returned? And if so, is he simply back to finish his drink?